Welcome everybody to the bodega, where first off I gotta say, looking at this mat, I've only done one project, and if it looks this bad, I can't wait to see what it looks like in a couple of months. All that aside, it's gonna get dirtier today as I pay tribute to the tiny terror known as Tonberry. This little menace deserves to be caged, and today I'm gonna fashion one for him. I've had this case for quite some time now, and honestly, this project is just an excuse to do a little spring cleaning. I picked this up at a Spirit of Halloween years ago, and apparently I paid $7 for it. This bat is a little too Halloween for me, so I'll chop it off and figure out something to replace it with that's more in line with Tonberry. For the base, I want to make a dry mountainous desert terrain. I think it'll suit Tonberry really well. I 3D printed this Tonberry from Thingiverse, and my plan is to make him a custom lantern that can be turned on and off using a switch that'll be fixed to the base. Shouldn't be too hard. Here we have all the pieces. I printed out an extra chunk of tail because Tonberry is going to have to undergo a little bit of surgery. I'll have to amputate his tail and replace it with a fresh transplant. Parts of the print have unseemly rough patch areas. Using an X-Acto knife, I can shave off the excess plastic. Following up with a high grit wet sandpaper ensures a nice smooth finish. As for the visible printing lines that remain, I'll deal with that later. Right now, I'm needed for surgery. I know you're nervous, but it'll be okay, little guy. Just have to mark out where I'll be making the incision. Nice and easy. Uh-oh.
We're losing him! He's dying!
Hold on! See? He's fine. Nothing to worry about. In order to create a strong and solid bond, I sprinkle some baking soda before applying the super glue. I make sure to cover all the areas, and this tail is ready to terrorize. Yeah. To bring down the coarseness caused by the glue, I go back to wet sanding. Remember these lines I said we were going to tackle before? They're all over the bottom of the print. Well, here's what I do for that. This here is Bondo brand glazing and spot putty. Apparently it's used for auto body repair, but it works wonders for 3D prints. Protect your preciouses, so make sure you're wearing gloves and a mask and working in an area with proper ventilation. Using a palette knife, I smear the putty over all those troublesome spots. In hindsight, I should have worn my respirator, but at the very least keep a mask on, because this stuff is potent. I smooth the putty with my finger, but not too much because it'll eat away at the glove. This stuff cures quickly, which means you won't have to wait long to start smoothing out all the spots where the printer struggled. I even put some on his hands. With that, it's back to sanding and smoothing out all the remaining rough spots that are left. Time to work on the rocks for the base. For that, I'm going to need some foam. I start by gluing two pieces of foam together and cutting them down to a good rock size. This portion really lets you get as creative as you want. There's no one mold for making a rock. You just gotta make it look rocky. Magic break.
Wow.
As I'm cutting the rocks, I use the base as a guide to make sure they fit. With my rocks carved and glued together, it's time to add a bit more texture. They look good, but they could look even rockier. How do I do that? With a little bit more magic. And a rock.
Let's rock.
Now that the rocks are in place, it's time to prime them. Mixing up a sludge of brown and black paint with Mod Podge, I give all the pieces a healthy coating. After they dry, I begin to paint them with a lighter brown color until they look like they came from a dog that needs some fiber in his diet. Woof! I resume painting in lighter browns, allowing the rocks to dry between coats. For the base, I use a sand color as my base coat, and after it's completely covered and dried, I go over it haphazardly in a darker brown. I go back and lightly retouch the base with the sand color in order to get a good blend going. After that, it's time to get my Tonberry painted. For the head, I'm using a bright green for a base coat that I'll eventually airbrush a more muted green over. Same for the tail. This is my first time using mineral spirits, which I'll be mixing with a burnt umber oil paint. Again, this stuff is strong, even if it's advertised as odorless. so ventilate and protect your preciouses. I give the rocks a generous helping of the wash, making sure to get in all the cracks and crevices. The base gets some too, as well as all the folds and lower parts of Tonberry's robe that he most certainly drags along the ground as he slowly stalks his victims. Using a paper towel, I lightly dab some of the wash off each piece as well as the base. Now that everything is in its place, I need to figure out the foliage situation. This is my big bin of moss, but the color is too bright and lively for Tonberry's stomping grounds. I'm gonna have to airbrush the moss to make it look a little more dried out. For that, I use darker shades of green followed with a tannish brown. To cover Tonberry's flesh, I'm using Vallejo's Model Air airbrush paint set. This light green was just the shade that I needed. I'm happy with the results. Not too bright, not too dark. If you're wondering what's going on here, I wanted to paint his eyes without ruining his skin, so for that I'm turning to the silly putty. With that, say hello to the newest Ninja Turtle.
Cowabunga!
So I laid on the yellow a bit too thick. Here's hoping this works. Nah, it peeled the Vallejo right off the eyes too. This one's a bust. I redid the eyes with a paintbrush and some airbrush paint. I want Tonberry to be secure to his base. For that, I'm going to mark out the placement and make 2 holes with my manual drill. After fixing the base with proper metal foot pegs, it's time to set Tonberry down. Nice. A few small details and it's time to move on to highlighting. For those who haven't watched the previous video, I prefer using eyeshadow as a way of applying highlights. With the help of a trusty Q-tip, I'm able to blend the colors smoothly. For those wondering, it works just as well on foam as it does on plastic and clay. To make the lantern see-through, I'm going to be using parts of this acrylic dowel. This truly is one of my favorite parts of crafting. Having an idea so clearly in my head and going through the process of trying to make it happen. When it clicks, it feels great. To light his little lantern, I'm going to be using this flame candle. I got the idea from Dr. Toys, a really talented crafter. Be sure to check out his channel if you haven't already. For the top and the bottom of the lantern, I designed and printed these lids. I made this handle off camera. After fixing it in place, the top is ready to be glued on. Taking the plastic flame, which I cut down to size, I glue it to the bottom base of the lantern. I give it a little test to preview how it should look in the end, and with that it's safe to assemble. Just one more test to keep the excitement going. I drilled a hole to line up with the lantern and I prepped this rock to hide the wires that'll travel up from the bottom of the base. It provides a nice snug fit, and with that it's time to start setting down the rocks. Can't forget about this little guy. As I'm placing the moss, I'm trying to be careful not to overdo it. I want this base to retain its arid-like qualities. Tonberry wouldn't be complete without his trusty Japanese kitchen knife in hand. It's time for this bat to take a hike. Wasn't too bad of a cut. I was originally going to put this Final Fantasy VII logo on the top, but I felt like it would have been too much. What do you guys think? Let me know. The handle gets screwed back into the lid and Tonberry will be preserved never to stab anyone again. Thanks everyone for watching. If this is your first time, you can catch me on Instagram. Check out the links in the description below. And if you're subscribed, keep an eye out on the community tab for clues and in-progress photos of all my upcoming projects. Always remember, any day is a good day to start crafting. Until next time, my friends, God bless.